just like setting hunting regulations and license and tags and things like that, you need to know something about how many beavers are out there, and the state considers the beaver population healthy in Oregon. And I had a student look at every state and every Canadian province regulations this past year, and even the most strict states in the United States and Canada still allow beaver trapping and hunting, even California. So every state considers there to be enough beavers in the state or the province to have some allowable take for hunting and trapping. That all falls, trapping falls under that world of wildlife management. Nuisance work is a lot of the work that we deal with Wildlife Services and NWRC. And we don't look to manage populations, but we look to fix problems. If a culvert is flooding a road and causing human health and safety issues, we need to resolve that conflict. If it includes some non-lethal device, that's what we prefer to do. If it requires something else, we need to fix that problem, not manage that population. And so a lot of these decision points there fall into that. How can we maximize the value of beavers, still have beavers in the area, and reduce that conflict and move on to the next problem? And the third group, where we're talking about reintroduction and habitat, that falls under this huge topic that we're calling beaver-related restoration, in my mind, or beaver-assisted restoration. Some of those things that are trying to, again, maximize those benefits of beavers. But there are some things to me, like later when we talk about mimic and habitat, that's really more stream restoration. To me, if it doesn't involve beavers, it's just traditional stream restoration efforts. And there's still kind of this mix of, well, we think beavers are these wonderful habitats, or these wonderful creatures that create all this habitat, and they do wonderful things. Oh, but we need to help them out a little bit by getting them started with rock weirs or log jams or VDAs or whatever. And to me, that doesn't mix well, because they either can do it and will, or they can't. And if they can't, and we're assisting them, then they're not really the ecosystem engineers that we built them up to be. So that's what kind of separates 3 and 4 to me, is if we're looking at restoring streams with devices that mimic beavers, that's great. Let's test it and evaluate it, but let's not make it sexy by saying that we're working with beavers. That's Jimmy Taylor's opinion. I know there are others. But where these things are going on, we need to understand more about how beavers are perceiving those. And right now, Jason Dunham and I are working with some others. It's a really interdisciplinary group, and we're about to submit a paper that looks at some of this. It's not a myth-busting paper, but we just want to show where the research is and where the hopes and expectations of these beaver-related restoration goals are, and what's missing in the middle. Where do we need more research to get the knowledge to see if some of these things are really doable, and where do we go from there?
Tom, just to kind of follow up where Jimmy left off, I used to be involved in this group pretty intimately a decade or so ago, and so I'm speaking as a public. I'm an associate with ODFW, and I don't know if there's enough, it seems like there's enough chunks, different types of information out there, like Tom just handed out. And is it of value to think about a beaver management plan? Would that help? Not to do it just to do it, so you have a beaver management plan on the shelf. Too many of those. Would it be of value to the department and for others interested in working with beaver to have kind of a guide, a comprehensive guide? It was suggested before, perhaps, in this meeting that where can I go? She didn't know about the webpage on ODFW, which is loaded with information. And so I guess I'd throw that out to the department and to think about. was moving.
Chris? Yeah, I'd like to offer an alternative worldview to Jimmy's. Politely, I strongly disagree with your breaking this beaver management template into discrete areas. And 2 points. One, the trapping, which is wildlife management, separate from all the other parts. If we actually knew, if states actually had population assessments of beaver and decided that they legitimately were in a position of excess production so that harvest could have no effect on the population, then a regulated harvest, as is done for deer or elk, for example, would be wildlife management. Allowing take of animals that you have no idea how many are there now, how many could be there, is not management. That's a revenue stream and a recreational opportunity for citizens of the state. Because beaver interact with their environment to change stream habitats to the point that they are other species depend on, as well as the landforms depend on them, allowing certain numbers of beavers on the landscape is actually managing other species and managing the waters of the state. And so they are connected. And that goes to the second part, which is habitat restoration should be separated from beaver population management. And if people weren't on this planet, yes, I would agree with you. But we have degraded the landscape to the point where beaver are not able to do their normal course of business. The hydrologic simplification of our watersheds from channels simplifying, channel straightening, from removing of sources of wood, takes some streams and moves them out of dam building beaver habitat, from the reach of dam building. And therefore, we do need to do interventions that are stream restoration to allow beaver to turn a stream into a beaver dominated wetland, and do what's now called stage 0, what you think the stream should look like. You can't go with simple restoration in some cases from current stream landform shapes and functions to historic levels. That was done by beavers. Beavers can't do it for you unless you move the system to a new state. So I'm not taking all of stream restoration and catching beavers to it, but I agree with you that there's sort of this latest and greatest thing called beavers, and therefore you make your restoration have beavers in the title, and therefore you should get funding. I think that's wrong. That's riding a wave. But legitimately, geomorphological modification of streams is necessary in some cases for beavers to actually do their and beaver dam building, which carries on and changes the land times of streams to the point I think we're the ultimate target of it. And so I see all of these things working well together, and I think it would be unwise to separate them from the population regulation side and then also from the stream restoration leg up for beavers to do their thing.
The other Chris. I'll go back to your first part about beaver management and needing to know the beavers. I've said this before, so I'll say it again. For those of us that work for ODFW, most of our beavers find that being a problem simply because even if we're happy to keep the beaver, if the beavers fill the dam and pile up water, they're doing it on somebody else's property. We just have a little narrow right of way, and often adjacent landowners will say, get rid of your beaver. And so if ODFW managed beavers, I think they know what the numbers are, they should know where they are and what places could use more. And then those of us who have beavers that we need to remove would put them there. Because right now the burden of, we have an excess beaver and we would love to give it to someone, but we really don't have the time, energy, money, expertise, whatever, to figure out where it's going to go, radio tagging, net checking, whatever else all of the relocation guidelines are. So I would again advocate that someone, if it's not ODFW, then someone who's in the environmental arena, be that go-between, get those those databases together of where beaver are, where we could use it more, so that those of us who really don't want to kill them, but don't have another place to put them, give them a chance at life. So, that's my 2 cents. I was saying that next year, but there you go.
So tying into the population section that we're having, I've been working with, or talking with, quite a few wildlife control officers, right? So a lot of these people have businesses that are like, you know, your classic exterminator business where they deal with a whole host of potential nuisance wildlife, and many of these businesses have the WCO, the wildlife control officer, as a permit or a license through ODFW. I think they are a large, when we're talking about population, I think they're a large piece we need to consider too, because I would kind of tie your trapping and your nuisance together here and say, I think we need reporting for the wildlife control officer and lethal take in the state. From my discussions with those fellows, and I've given a few presentations now, I've yet to find one that had any idea around, or had heard of non-lethal beaver management. Many of them didn't like beaver jobs. They don't like waiting out in the wetlands, and they're, you know, get $400 for trapping a colony or so. It's not a very lucrative job. But they described to me doing a lot, you know, multiple jobs a month, right? And so then kind of to tie that in with an anecdote around the population and this discussion of what John was saying around preferred habitat being deep water habitat. I'm seeing a lot of wildlife control officers being called to the riverfront properties where they're doing vegetation damage and, you know, they're kind of high value homes, where the default is not to call wildlife services, which is more of like a role mentality, but is instead to call, you know, a wildlife control officer that's, you know, a pest control company, right? And I'm seeing a lot of lethal control of beaver on main-stem systems based on pretty simple tree chewing over and over at the same site, right? So if we're working up the hypothesis of main stem habitat has to be at some level of carrying capacity before we start getting dispersal into tributaries and the associated ecosystem services. You can imagine these, you know, beautiful homes with Japanese maple that are getting eaten as like black holes in that population, where you've got wildlife control officers controlling beaver. You know, I was talking to one guy had trapped 7 colonies from this one spot on a river this year, you know, and it's just like excellent beaver habitat, right? So that they fill in the niche immediately. So I think that's a really important piece that maybe hasn't been brought up at this meeting before. And since there's a licensing mechanism already with the wildlife control community, if we could have, and I know it's probably Derek's purview, some number associated with that, or even if it's not a number, just I think that's a piece that needs considered.
You're talking reporting by wildlife control officers. So,
Yeah.
again, Derek would know this better than I, but I think if we give them a permit, they're reporting to us. The ones that don't need to report are, if you don't need to report if it's on your own property, you get some nature that's not on your property. So you can take a beaver on your own land with no permit from ODFW. It's a state statute, actually it's under the Department of Ag. But if you're a wildlife control operator that does get called, you're supposed to report to us.
Okay, so maybe I'm just missing that piece. 'Cause the numbers I've seen are wildlife services numbers, and then the fur bearer take. But I've never seen a wildlife control officer, as in, you know, private business, out doing wildlife control on beaver.
We have that, right?
Fur harvest. That's in the fur harvest?
Should be in that.
They're not reported in the fur harvest, they're just reported to the control operator.
because we asked them to. But there's no social history of trapping beavers year-round on private property.
Oh, no, I get that.
Right, so these people who are asking wildlife control operators to do that work, like Tom was referring to, they could ask anybody to do it. It doesn't have to be a wildlife control operator. So the statistics that we have don't reflect at all what is possibly being trapped on private property, since nobody has to report.
So just clarification on that, so where is the line between what is a wildlife control operator and somebody, where you're not trapping it on your own land, but you're bringing somebody else in, so in exchange of money, so it's a commercial business, you're doing this as a business, you have to have your license, or maybe not?
No, it's, what's confusing about all this is state statute that lists beavers as a predator
Yes.
on private property. That's what confuses everybody. Wildlife control operator has the ability to, for instance, trap and relocate if we allow them to, where you can't nobody can relocate, even a predator under the state statute without a permit from us.
Right.
You can kill them, but you can't catch them and take them and let them go somewhere else.
Yeah. I'm
So
just
that's the
wondering
kind
about
of, that's the kind of
gray
authority
area.
we give a wildlife control operator.
Right.
But we do limit the species that a wildlife control operator may handle.
Yes.
It's actually a small list, because most of these animals are fairly easy to trap and are typically nuisance wildlife, but a lot of them that we don't want people to handle at all, they're not permitted under WCO.
Yeah, I was wondering what the scope of who can be involved in where for the trapping that happens outside of either the WCO activity or fur bearing activity. That is, if there's a problem animal on your own property, that's allowed. Or Tom, you just said, you can ask someone to come and deal with it. But you can only ask the wildlife control officer, or you ask your neighbor, or you happen to know a trapper, in that, that's the part I'm asking. Unlicensed players, who can do that? And then I think what Jacob's asking is what's the magnitude of that relative?
Well, again, I'm not a lawyer, but I think those animals listed as predators, it's the landowner or their agent. So if they choose to have their agent be a someone who's permitted to do this activity on, say, public land or other places, that person would report to us. If they choose their agent to be their next door neighbor because they have the capacity to do it, that person would not have to report. Is that accurate?
Okay, capacity, the landowner is granting them permission, and they don't need to be licensed. The
Right.
agent, there's no specification about the
Agent is a vague.
Okay, I guess that's my question.
Rob?
Thank you. So I'd like to support Charlie's suggestion with an answer yes. I think a statewide management plan for beaver would be appropriate and valuable. I'd also like to support creation of a network of Jacob-like people who have been trained in non-lethal solutions to nuisance problems. And there is training available, and I think there's a new nationwide organization called the Beaver Institute that's available to train. I'm also aware of Massachusetts DOT that has a contract with an NGO to take care of nuisance problems that's cost-effective for their DOT. I wonder if missing from your list, Tom, is this notion of private property take of beavers, whether it's poaching or nuisance or whatever. It seems like that's not reported, and that's a big gap in our knowledge base. We don't really know how many people are just either poaching beavers or just killing them because they don't like them.
Well, I'm guessing the poachers won't be reporting themselves.
Right. So it seems to me that that's a challenge for the state, and the beaver state, where you can just go out and shoot it, throw it in the trash can and legally not tell anybody, that's a big gap in our management ability.
Yeah, and I'm guessing that one might take a state statute.
No, there's no question. ODFW has no authority.
We have no authority over that.
So the statute, as I recall, correct me if I'm not right, it says that rodents are predators.
Yes.
And that my two legislators didn't know. They didn't know that that was their statute. So I wonder if this group could inform the legislature that that statute has implications which may have been beyond their intent in writing it, whatever they had in mind when they wrote about rodents. They may have been talking about rats and mice for all I know.
Doug, doesn't the State Department of Agriculture have authority on that?
Yes, they do.
I'm not related to that statute in any way. I happen to work for ODA. I believe the statute defines a beaver as a predatory rodent. So it's not saying all rodents are predators, it's saying you can kill beavers because they're a quote predatory rodent, if I remember.
That's correct.
So, I'll note that. I would just like to say that part of the initial mission of the work group was to work within existing regulations. This is a big can of worms that I think we as this group, didn't want to tackle that as a group. In order to allow different interests to come together and have discussion about practical ways to move things forward. So I'll make a note, but that's kind of what the genesis of the Beaver Work Group was around. It's in the mission statement, using existing rules and statutes. It's the first phrase.
So, Tom, within that, I wonder if there's opportunities for ODA to allow for protection of beavers on private property under certain circumstances, like if it's essential fish habitat, or if it's a listed species where they could designate a place within the current statutory and regulatory abilities. We don't want you killing the beavers here. That's a question.
Again, I'm not a lawyer, but the way I read that statute, it's pretty wide open, and the Department of Ag itself doesn't have the authority to do that. I think the statute would need to change.
So Tom, maybe, I appreciate the line that the two statutes that are in conflict, this comes up every time we meet. But I'm wondering if I can offer, phrase a question that maybe ODFW can ask, itself and other agencies, is how does ODFW do its mission of wildlife management for this species, for beaver, when there is a large amount of take that's regulated by another state agency, Department of Ag, that you have no direct control. And that take might be larger than the take that you allow. The management tool that you have, which is issuing fur bearer permits and doing your district wildlife biologist responding to nuisance calls. Those are your management tools. And if this outside Department of Ag controlled impact on your responsibility as management of this wildlife is larger than your management levers, how can you do that?
Especially when the question gets introduced that it might have impacts on PSA species. And I think the last observation I'd share on the private landowner traffic is that I've gotten numerous calls from folks that are looking to get rid of wetland on their private property. Say that, it's investment property that's going to be developed in the future. And beaver are seen as a liability within the private landowning community because of concerns around, a bunch of biologists sitting around, all the stuff that we see as great is a potential liability concern if you are a private landowner that has plans for that property that isn't epic wetland habitat. And so I've been getting these calls where people are interested in lethal removal of beaver simply from the point of view of degrading wetland habitat so that it doesn't flag other regulatory issues for them in the future. So I think that's an important thing to think about when beaver are getting managed on private lands. It's not necessarily solve it with a flow device or trap their trees. Many of the people I've come across aren't interested in that sort of solution. They're interested in no wetlands.
Yeah, drying out the wetlands. They kill beaver to dry out the wetlands so they don't have regulatory on wetlands control. That's exactly what's happening. You got one over there, Tom, in the back.
Go ahead. And we'll come over back to you, Joe. A couple thoughts, and this is a bit outside of my realm of expertise, but one is, I think one of your original questions is, would there be value in ODFW issuing a BMP that very clearly outlined their position and clarified regulations and things like that? And I'd be surprised to hear anybody say that that wouldn't be of value. I mean, that's what we've invested a ton of time and energy in going through, and I think that there's still a lot of lingering unanswered or questions that are answered differently depending on who you talk to, so clarity there I think would be super helpful. As far as the population situation, getting an understanding of population and distribution. I sit on the Lower Willamette Pond Turtle Working Group, and we have a website that allows the public to report the location-specific GPS location of pond turtles, and then actually reports that data back to the public in the aggregate on a county-by-county basis, but allows people with access to that website to see the exact locations of who and when and where and what they're reporting. And it's been a super helpful tool to at least get, you know, far-reaching anecdotal information of, hey, there's populations here and there and everywhere that we can then go and do trapping and surveys of those locations and get an idea of the population. It also allows us to do some temporal analysis of these areas where, hey, there's beaver reported here in the summertime all the time, or in the spring or whatever, but never any other time of year. You know, turtles in our case, but it potentially facilitates kind of looking at the temporal existence of those populations. And the last, and I'm a little bit hesitant to open this can of worms, but you know, so long as lethal take is the cheapest option, lethal take will by default be the option. Mm-hmm. And I certainly don't want that to cost more. That's not what I'm suggesting, but I think these programmatic level permits, working with DSL, you know, not having to go through a 404 or go through, you know, bringing out fish biologists to put in a pond leveler, if that is the bar that we have to overcome to install something like that, lethal take looks really, really good. And so how do we make those non-lethal options more streamlined, more cost-effective, more accessible? And until that's done, I don't see that as being a very, as much as I like that to be the case, it's not a very good option. Just some thoughts.
Thank you. Charlie, do you have something?
I did have something. I'll put on a little different hat as an ODFW retiree, because it has to do with some stuff that we did back then. And Jimmy, I think you were involved in this, and Chris, I think you were. And we had set up basically exactly what you talked about. ODFW was going to pay for it, pay for trappers to go out. ODFW was going to have predetermined locations for this positive thing to relocate beavers to. The trapper would do it, it would be done professionally, as efficiently as possible. And the guy's name was Cash. Yeah, he had it all worked out. It's kind of sitting at the way at the bottom of the index to make that happen. So I think the mechanism has already been sitting there. Probably just needs some dusting off to.
No, I think it, again, came down to somebody had to pay for radio collars and that stuff. There was limited involved in the cost. And again, as was just mentioned by Joe, as long as the cheapest option, because there's no rules otherwise, cheapest option is get rid of the beaver, that's the route you're gonna take, because if you tally up the cost of, tracking it, finding, all of it, it's a pretty penny. And I know for ODOT, on average, we don't have 3,000 beaver per store. We, on average, have about 50 beaver a year, not this year, but many years. If you add 10,000 times 50, that's a lot of population. So, we'd be happy to give some, but all the other associates.
Tom?
So we talked about the updated relocation requirements last year. And so one of the things that was inserted into that was a potential pathway for some sort of programmatic permitting for the relocation part of the permitting process. So there is a mechanism to do that streamlining in there. No one has chosen, no one's approached us about that yet.
BLM's been working with us a little bit.
That's true.
We did the
Sorry.
relocation last year. And also, I just wanted to point out too, we've got a lot of lands, we have 27, we did a skit, which we had an exclusion through NEPA and everything. And we have about 27 sites right now that we've been looking at that we can go ahead and put beaver into. The problem being is we need a area that we can store them into family units. So what I've been doing so far is I've been talking with the Oregon Zoo. We've got them on board. We need about 66,000, I think, is what it came up with for the 2 holding facilities at the zoo. So we need some type of funding source. But that's just going to be a Band-Aid. I mean, we've only got, 27 sites right now, and 5 to 8 beavers, so it's 160 beavers. So it's just a Band-Aid at this point. But, I mean, we've got location on public lands that we can put them, working with ODFW. So,
Have you explored unused runways like you did in Metal?
I can't hear it, I'm sorry.
Have you explored unused runways in some of these fish hatcheries?
That's what I did last year when we did it. I used an ODFW fishery that they were going to decommission, and they let us use it last year. But at that point, what's nice about going through the zoo, ODFW really likes it because they're professionals. They've got their vet on staff and everything else. The beavers will be taken care of by the personnel at the zoo and everything else too. So it's a plus-plus situation. They just needed to get the permits and everything in place, which they got. We just need to come up with the funding to get the 2 areas up. Again, they're not wanting to they're wanting to start small at this point. I mean, there's the possibility of if we do this, there's going to just be a barrage of beavers coming in, and they can't take care of that. We can't, on the BLM side of things, be able to take care of the translocation and everything else at a huge scale at this point. So baby steps right now.
What kind of scale are you thinking about, either to start or what you could scale up to the northern Willamette Valley, or just?
Well, right now it's us in the Cascades, and I've been working with, Don retired, but I've been working with Don and Nancy also. So just in that area.
Okay.
Connor?
I wanted to come back to, actually, Rob said 20 minutes ago, we were talking about the statutes and rules and ODA and whatnot. Rob asked, could ODA, he asked the universe, could ODA have a guideline, I don't remember exactly what word you used, a process where landowners who have beavers with fish habitat need to keep their beavers, or I'm paraphrasing, but, so, I think in terms of the statutes and rules, and also in terms of kind of how ODA operates internally, we can't regulate that. But if there was enough interest and discussion, it's possible that ODA would consider something like that on a voluntary basis. So it would be an outreach and education thing. it wouldn't be a regulatory thing. And I'm also gonna say, I think there would be some work to do to have that be a possibility.
Tom? There's a simple fact that coho are listed. And coho and salmon are brothers. I look 40 to 50 generations ahead because that's my heritage. We have got to stop the butchering of beavers. I don't know how we're going to go about doing it, but by dang, we need to get after it. Because the simple fact of the law, we are violating federal law. That's the truth. How we work through this, we've got to come up with some solutions. Part of when you're relocating, though, that you need to think about is piling big piles of food species and hiding species, sticks and twigs. They love cedar. Give them some food. Go out in the forest and trim some food. Go give them some cedar to chew on and to winter through. Give them a hut enough that they can go hide. No, we're not going to save every one of them. But if we go about it the right way, we can do a lot better than we have been doing. And not involving ODA is insane, in my opinion. And Tom, you're wrong. I've written lots of letters on this for years. That's probably part of the reason I'm on here. I don't even know who invited me. I don't know whether Doug did or, one of the directors, or I don't know who invited me. Nobody told me who invited me. But they invite me because I speak for beaver. I've lived my whole life protecting beaver. When my grandfathers built roads, they protected beaver. And Colorado and Utah are good leads to go and look at the regulations and go look. It's been illegal to harvest a beaver in Utah since the late 1800s without a permit. And I don't know what you guys are all doing because I can't keep track of all of you, but I can keep track of your regulations. And I love writing letters, as some of you know. And I'm not going to lose my job if I write a letter. They can't fire me from being disabled. And I've been that way for 29 years. And I haven't had the income. And I don't have stipends to help me get to meeting. I do it out of my heart. And we have got to protect beaver for coho and other salmon species. We're never going to get there if we don't. And that video that I shared with you, Cammie's on one of those. Steve Trask is on one of them. There's 4 of them. And we have got to find a way to bridge this gap, no matter what that mission statement says. Because that's not a valid mission statement anymore. And I'll tell you that in a letter, Tom.
Okay.
And I'll share it with the legislators, and I'll get after a good letter for you. Because it's really key to my heart, and it's key to my tribes. And you're violating the tribes when you violate beaver. And you're violating salmon when you violate beaver. Because we have an example. We had a twin study in the coast on the Salmon River. One had beavers, one didn't. It'd been almost 15 years of study. And then recreational trappers come in overnight and killed all the beavers. And it's a simple fact of the matter is they didn't have to report it. It wasn't illegal. They can do whatever they dang well please. And pesticide companies don't have to report. There's a whole bunch. besides private landowners and private timber companies that don't have to report. It's about time we turn this around. Thank you.
Rob?
Thank you, Tom. Following up on the last few comments and a lot of them, I want to compliment ODFW for forming this work group. I think it's good. I appreciate it. I appreciate the ability to attend. I have a suggestion, a formal motion, if you will. I think it would help this group's effectiveness if you deleted the first 5 words of the mission statement. And that is, they are using existing rules and statutes. I don't think we should be limited to that. It seems to me that this group could come up with suggestions for the agencies and the legislature to consider, knowing we're just an informal advisory group, ad hoc group, but this is too limiting. And I think issues such as dealing with the take of use on private land deserves more open-minded discussion. So that's my suggestion, is to amend the mission statement. I think it was a great way to get started, but I think it's time to open it up a little more now.
Okay, noted.
I second.
I third.
Okay, we have.
About a vote. We can vote. It's just a vote. We could all say yes or no. Come on, Tom, just ask. A raise of hands. How many people want to protect beaver? I hope every single one of you raise your hand.
Beaver.
We all do.
I think we should maybe have some more deliberative thought about revising the mission statement.
Yeah, it isn't just the mission statement, though, we need to revise.
There's a lot of work to be done.
You are mandated in ODFW to protect coho, and you're not doing your job.
We're doing our job within the laws.
That's
and
my
requirements.
point.
Well,
You
we don't
can
control
go to
those.
the legislators. You can ask. I know for a fact Doug can go to the legislators and ask. And it shouldn't be just me typing letters that I have no credentials according to them.
Everybody in here can go to the legislators and ask.
Yeah, that's my point. Doesn't do me any good to do it by myself.
Okay, so are there any other points?
I'm going to add one little thing. I believe ODA's official representative, at least from our perspective, to this group is Judith Collins. I've been on the list for a while and just I've always had a conflict with the meeting. And Judith wasn't, I thought she was going to come late, but she got called over to the Capitol with something. But I will fill her in on this particular topic, that there was some discussion about potentially revising the mission statement. I would not say there was a decision to revise it, but there was discussion about it. And that ODA's regulations were discussed in the context of state and federal obligations to recover the fish. So I will make sure that Judith is in the loop on the discussion in terms of ODA.
Tom, that reminds me of an obscure fact from a couple of years ago, and that is when the state submitted recommendations to no fisheries for the coho recovery plan. One of the recommendations, and I think it came from ODA, was the formation of a beaver pond compensation fund or something like that, where when there's a nuisance beaver, there's a pot of public money available to help provide non-lethal solutions to the problems. That's in the record, and I don't think anybody's ever followed up on it, but it's another idea on how we might support the non-lethal solution of real-world beaver nuisance problems.
Rob, along those lines of tools that exist in other places, there's the Safe Harbor program. And I was wondering, do you have a take on NOAA's ideas around the Safe Harbor program? Was that looked at around the beaver ponds too?
So Irma behind me may be more current on this, but I know that the Fish and Wildlife Service has used Safe Harbor a lot. NOAA Fisheries has not used it very much. it's got its own complications, but, so that's an ongoing question as far as I know. Harley, do you know any more than that?
Well, a couple of thoughts. Related to your question. You know, the debate about whether or not the state rules are good or bad or different, they are what they are. And I think there are those that can try to change those. That's their prerogative, but I think that trying to live with those rules to encourage private landowners to want to live with beavers, I think that's a more realistic approach today. Thinking about how you can incentivize that, and you all have done that with relocation guidelines, and there's folks out there, as I understand it, as I learn about it, that are all about relocating beavers as long as they have the permits. But there may be other ways to incentivize private landowners, and one of them, yes, is some sort of Endangered Species Act assurance, like a programmatic state park district. Now, we haven't had a lot of internal conversation about that applying to beavers, to private landowners, but we can have those conversations for sure. And I think there's other voluntary conservation incentives, like some sort of perhaps financial offset for private landowners. I'm not talking necessarily industrial timber landowners, I know we do it a little bit differently, but maybe there's opportunities out there to encourage them not to take the cheapest option that's well articulated, they're just going to continue to take that cheapest rate, it's the cheapest, but maybe there's ways to really provide some sort of offset. So as I listen to the conversation, and thanks for having me, it's my first time here, the more we can think about, you know, the lens and how private landowners think of these things, hopefully bring them into the conversation. Maybe we have already, maybe they don't know the extent of that, or industry groups that represent those landowners. I think, to me, that might be a fruitful area to explore. So I think I answered your question
Totally.
long way around.
I guess I'd offer some, because I represent that group, right, the industrial landowners in terms of, and we'd be open to that kind of conversation, right? So I don't think you could go very far and find a landowner that was intentionally going to try and denude his property of beaver, right? I think Jimmy's got those experiences, probably lots of other folks. It occurs to me to try and figure out, it appears that the large concern is quantifying the tank right now, right? And you guys have a fairly good feel for the recreational harvest potentially, and then folks from Wildlife Services that are having to do that, we're able to get those numbers. And try and get our head wrapped around talking to my folks what kind of program they've got. Now, the far-flung private landowner, small mom and pop kettle, nice house on the river, we wouldn't be able to help much with that. But I think it's important to give the landowners credit in terms of what they have done, what they can contribute, and jumping to the regulation piece or moving the mission statement of a group whose energy is intended to do the best you can within the current stuff. That sounds great to me, and we'd be all in on those kind of conversations. But much beyond that, it gets pretty uncomfortable, I think, as you can imagine. So, we're here to have that conversation in good faith, absolutely. That's one thing. So I would offer that. What can we do proactively? It's best.
Tom, I have a question for him. Can I ask?
Question for who?
Timber.
I don't know.
Oh, I get in so much trouble. I can't imagine. I want your answer. My question to Tim. Okay, yeah. My question is, timber wants to save coho. To save coho, you have to save beaver. I have seen beaver at 5,000 feet, clear up to 8, with 100 beaver dams to climb that elevation when I was young.
Okay. So what's the question?
Do you want to save coho?
So
Simple question.
So I don't know that yes, the answer is simple and straightforward. Obviously, we want to be good stewards of the land
That's
and
right.
the resources. That's unequivocally the mission of every landowner that I represent, no doubt in my mind. And so then you've got to make sure that you're quantifying what the challenge is,
I know.
right? And understanding those fully. And I think the presentation earlier started to allude to the fact that because you've got potential here, potential there, or beavers there, or beavers not, the absence of dam does not necessarily predicate the problem, correct? And so we've got to quantify some of that stuff before we start saying you can't get rid of them because that's going to harm whatever else. And so absolutely, we want to be good stewards of the land. And if there can be conversations productively within that scale, I'm all ears.
We'll go have a cup of coffee one of these days.
Just a quick comment. Coming from, my job as a wildlife biologist on federal land management, forest management agency, I think one of my challenges is, I like the idea of doing all we can to incentivize, living with beavers, but there are times when people, it does seem like a lot of times it just feels really good if we just go to beavers and put them somewhere else. But the problem with somebody like myself is when we don't have really good information on what our beaver landscape is out there, how many beavers do we have, what is the right place to be putting them, it's hard to feel really like a responsible manager to just say, oh yeah, come just dump some beaver out on our landscape. So I think something that's going to be helpful for us is to have better tools so that if we do have those times when we have requests for getting beavers to relocate, we have good places where we feel are appropriate to release beavers on the landscape.
Quick reaction on that. If you aren't already, I encourage you to coordinate with the Washington State Beaver Work Group because they've got a whole lot of people who have been studying relocation for a long time. Lots of good information to share back and forth.
And if you've got seasonals and downtime, send them out to go look for beaver sign and suitable habitats. All when you're in the forest, have them take a look. It's not that much extra work.
Okay. So, good discussion, passionate discussion.
Thank you. I am passionate about beaver.
Well, I think we are all
Good.
interested in beaver here and promoting beaver within, well, I won't get into that. But, some of the things I'm hearing today is a need for better information about distribution. I think we can all get behind that. That could potentially inform a management plan, relocations and all that. So I think that's a foundational need personally. I think another foundational need is the educational piece and providing information and options to landowners and educating wildlife control operators and things like that. I think that's foundational. Those are two big giant things I think are that we can probably all get around within the current construct of the laws. So those are some big underlying pieces I see behind a lot of the things we've talked about today. And then obviously the other one that came up is the other big one is laws around predators or predatory animals in Oregon. That's a much bigger nut to crack, but it certainly is something that there's some thought and passion behind. So with that,
Tom.
there was a public comment period on the agenda, which I should probably just take off because I think we did that, right? But the Beaver Work Group used to be kind of with official members. They were actually appointed to the work group, and it's since morphed. I don't even know if we have a list of members, and it's become much more all-inclusive.
I was appointed. I didn't ask to be on it. I was appointed. I don't know by whom.
Well, I
Okay,
You've attended.
this makes
there
my
have been
second.
no appointments recently, or, right, there have been no appointments, they would have gone through me.
Okay,
So there's a lot of new people who've showed up, but there's no quote-unquote appointments. And the public comment period was for people who weren't officially on the Beaver Work Group to make comments. I should probably just take that off. So the nature of the group has changed a little bit. So, anyway,
there's one other thing that you could do at ODFW, and that's to make all beaver kills permitted. Through through ODA and ODFW,
that's something that was mentioned.
yes.
Along those lines already. So, with that, I will get some notes written up from this meeting minutes and distribute it to the group. If the people who said that they would give me something to distribute to the group can get me that in the next, it's not gonna happen, and this isn't gonna happen in the next 2 or 3 weeks, but within that period, if you can give me some, I can send out those links or documents along with the notes to the whole group. And we'll see about meeting next time. It's been on an annual basis. Last couple times it's been in December. So with that, I think we will adjourn, and I appreciate everybody's time and input in the meeting. Thank you.
And long-distance traveling, too,
And long distance traveling by a lot of people.
in a storm. Flooding, trees down.